and remind us why we celebrate and honor service members and veterans. Hey, Kizzy.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear. To support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. And to bear true faith. And allegiance to the same. That I will obey. The orders of. The President of the United States. And the orders of. Those officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God.
We celebrate Veterans Day on the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice that began on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The timing of this holiday is quite deliberate in terms of historical fact. But somehow it always seems quite fitting to me that this day comes deep in autumn when the colors are muted and the days seem to invite contemplation. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise, but most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. And all we can do is remember. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. In memory of those who gave the last full measure of devotion, may our efforts to achieve lasting peace gain strength. Let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value, and borne by their memory, let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Okay, let us pray together. O Lord, my God, thank you that you promise to bring satisfaction and fulfillment to all our desires. Hear our prayer for our military and veterans and bless them today and each day. May they find satisfaction in their work, knowing that their labor is vital for the safety and security of our country. We thank you for the service members in our military who are currently serving around the globe. We ask that you would be with them and help them in times of trouble. We pray that you would draw near to them as they spend long periods of time away from their families. We thank you for the freedom we enjoy because of their work. Give them the strength to overcome everything that stands against them today. We pray you would give them peace when they suffer from past trauma, and we sustain them through your unfailing love. As we pray for our military and veterans, we ask that you would provide wisdom, guidance, and direction. Dispense your abundant grace upon them that they may live in your victorious light. Work in them through your Holy Spirit, that they would be equipped to carry out every good deed that you have prepared in advance for them. When they feel weary, we ask that you would refresh their strength. When they feel isolated, we ask that you would give them the assurance that you are with them. When our brothers and sisters feel daunted by the pressures of their work, may you increase their faith that they may depend on your strength for their success. May they know your all-conquering power in their life and work. We ask that you fulfill their needs. May they look to you as their provider. Give them endurance and remind them that their service is worthwhile. Lord, hear our prayer of thanks for our military and veterans who have made great sacrifices on our behalf. May they know that their service is appreciated by us. We ask that you would bless them and meet all their needs. We acknowledge the debt of gratitude that we owe them for the freedom of our country. May your love provide joy in their hearts. May your hand provide strength when times are hard. And may your spirit provide peace in their souls. And we pray all these things through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, so before I welcome Major Burns, I just want to do a little introduction here. Major Burns will be presenting on resilience, research findings and intervention on National Guard, active military, and the veterans population, where he will be presenting new trends, findings, and issues regarding service members on and off the battlefield. And some of those issues include resilience findings, recent self-harm trends, veterans' access to healthcare in the community, as well as holistic approaches to services and care. And we are so honored to have Major Burns here today with us, and he's quite an accomplished individual, and we're so honored to have Major Burns here today. So not only is Major Burns a brave hero, but he's also a social worker and a scholar. So he's definitely wearing a lot of hats. He is the California National Guard Behavioral Health Officer, and he currently covers the entire Central Valley region here in California. His responsibility includes networking and collaborating with community and behavioral health systems and resources to ensure that service members in our region are supported and prepared to meet the challenges that they experience or face ahead of them. Major Burns also has over 12 years of experience as a service member and over 10 years as a clinical social worker. Not only that, but he holds a doctorate a doctorate degree in education, and he is associated with multiple universities as an adjunct and teaching member. So we welcome you, Major Burns, this afternoon. And what an honor it is for us as social workers and professionals in the helping service community to be able to, in a sense, give back to our service members and our veterans who have so bravely given to us, and to be able to support them in this capacity. And so we're honored to have you here to support us and help us so that we can better provide care and support for service members and veterans.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I think I owe you some money now. That was a way too nice, but thank you so much, Si. I appreciate it. Would you guys just, I can start the presentation and go that way? Perfect. All right. And so I thought someone below asked if will there be time for Q&A. Yes, I'm gonna leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. But if something really is catching and someone wants to say something, I'm all for it, but I just want to keep on track and get the presentation started. So let me just share my screen with you guys real quick here. All right, can everyone see that? Thumbs up. All right, awesome. Okay, great. Again, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I'm not sure how many are, Si, can you see how many are attending today?
We have 65.
Oh, wow. This is one good way to lose my commission. All right, perfect. So going over it right now, we're going to go over a recent study, but I want to kind of give you guys a overview first. Here's a little outline of what we're going to be over. I'm happy to send this to Si and whoever wants it afterwards. I'm not sure of my audience, but we're going to go over a basic overview of the military. We have active duty, and that's exactly what you think, full-time soldiers. And then we have active duty Army, Air, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and now the new branch is the Space Force, which is, out of this world. It's kind of cool. It's kind of coming between mainly the Air Force and a little bit of the Army, and people are applying and making up those ranks. It's one of our newer branches. I don't even have included here. But then of these branches, we have the reserve component. The reserve component is the component I'm associated with full-time. Even though I'm active duty, but I'm active duty with the National Guard, and I fulfill a support role for the National Guard to help them support active duty and our state emergency, which is kind of a dual hat. So not everyone, not everyone has a National Guard. There's 54 National Guards total throughout the states and territories like Guam and Puerto Rico. But the Navy does not have a National Guard, obviously. That is just the reserves. And Army has a reserves and a National Guard. So every state has a National Guard, just to let you guys know that. When you get activated for a state emergency, those are state orders. We call them also ESAD, state active duty, and then sometimes Title 32. When you deploy overseas, that's Title 10. Those are federal operations. But doing both roles is important as a service member. So moving on here. So branches and components, the National Guard has that dual mission, is to take care of state emergencies. I think you guys saw this when there's like a hurricane. A lot of times National Guard will get caught in right away, or we saw this during the civil unrest during COVID. National Guard, and then sometimes it can become a federal mission, but not all the time. Only when there is a national crisis and the federal government authorizes those funds and it becomes a national emergency, and then the federal dollars are authorized to come in, but that's a different order. Okay, moving on. So most of the time, some stressors are different. This going back and forth, and we're going to kind of stay on that National Guard versus active duty for just a second. Active duty is exactly what you guys think. You live on a military base or near a military base. You have full-time health care, benefits, dental, maybe even some childcare resources. But being in the National Guard or the reserve component, that's not the same. You can be in the Army or in the Navy or any of these reserve components and not have full access to healthcare. Our healthcare system is you basically, you don't get federal services from like the VA until you've served enough or have a VA claim or an injury related to it. So common stressors for active duty can be you move a lot. You can move every 2 to 3 years. You have deployments. You can live, sometimes people think it's very positive, and it is, to live in another country. That can be a positive or negative depending on what country you might go to. Hazardous duty, high risk injury, can be high stress. But some of the reserve component, it is part-time. And I'd say that is sometimes a stressor because you have this dual role. We found that is definitely a stressor at people's work. Say, hey, I have drill this weekend. Oh, we're not going to give you a great shift now because you can't always be available. We see that a lot. We've even had lawsuits to where, I'll give you guys an example. I can't say their name, but a certain bank let an employee go because they had drill one weekend. Well, that's actually illegal. You can't do that. But the guy was very, very smart. He's like, can you just put this in an email? And they did. And there was a bank that didn't work out great for the bank. But so normally drill soldiers drill 2 days out of the month and 2 weeks out of the summer. That's what your recruiter may tell you. And it can be a lot more than that. It can be more than 2 weeks. You can do AAT depending on your unit's needs. For example, we have a unit in California called the 49th MPs, and they do something called the HERF. That is where we have this 24/7 available unit to cover down on medical and civilian and whatever needs that can come up. This HERF mission's very, very high up tempo, and their readiness needs to be above par. So depending if your unit has that mission, that's what your readiness has to be at. As of 2011, this is kind of old, but I'd say that's about the same for 1.4 million reserve members. That number hasn't changed too much. Active members has changed since we did the drawdown and got out of Afghanistan. I'd say they've gone down a little bit, and we'll go over that. But paying attention to the reserve component, it is limited benefits based on your service. That's one thing I really want you guys to, when you see someone in the military, reserve component versus active component, that's going to taper down on what benefits they qualify for. That includes educational, healthcare, and other benefits, including pay. So some of the benefits are bonuses, healthcare, obviously, base privileges, retirement, education. Being the reserve or National Guard or active duty, you get all these things. You can go on base. You have retirement benefits. You get pretty good bonuses depending on your branch and specific and education, but based on service again. So some of the stressors of going back and forth the citizen soldier is we do meet both federal and state missions, separation from your family. I've deployed 3 times in 5 years, which is more than some active duty components. But don't get me wrong, active duty can deploy that much, but we usually get a dwell period. By law, we're afforded a dwell, but sometimes if you're full-time, dwell it can be hard to get, especially in the National Guard. And there's also a lot of incentives to not dwelling. Moving on. So we're going to go over some of the rank structures. If you guys ever treat a service member, finding out what rank they are is very beneficial. Commissioned officers, that's what I am. Non-commissioned officers is the bulk of the military. And then we have junior enlisted, which is also part of the bulk. But the one thing I really want to point to is the NCO. The NCO or sergeant is really a core backbone of the U.S., especially for the U.S. Army. But the NCO at all levels is really an important facet. And it's become even more important in the last 6 months, and we'll go over that. But what does that mean? Enlisted ranks a majority of the military, 18 to 25. Now, obviously, senior enlisted are going to be a little bit older. And in the National Guard, we tend to have a little bit older than the 18 to 25 demographics because people go from active duty sometimes to fulfill their contracts to National Guard later on. They'll do maybe their first 4 and then they'll do 2 years in the reserve component or National Guard. Let's see, do I have to click this? Okay, yeah. Rank structure. Warrant officers are usually a very specialized branch, like a lot of pilots or technical branches will be warrant officers. It's very, very, very rare you meet a warrant officer. It's only 2% of the military. Commissioned officers are like about the top 15%. Those are the folks, a lot of times there are people that enlist and become officers either through ROTC, OCS, or commissioning school, like West Point, the Naval Academy, or something like that. There is a direct commission. A lot of medical officers are direct commissionee. I was not. I enlisted in 2010 and went to ROTC. But a lot of different ways. You usually have to have a college degree. Actually, 100% of the time you have to have a college degree. Very rarely, I've never met an officer that doesn't. Sometimes you can get a commission pending your degree gets approved, but if it's not approved in a certain amount of time, they may take the commission. So we are, in terms of California, we are in need of officers and enlisted. We missed our recruiting demographic according to some of the New York Times, I think by 60,000 that was active. I'm not sure what the National Guard was. I think we were in the 30,000 mark. That's all United States wide. So officer versus enlisted. It says executive level management. One thing I would say is absolutely the NCO Corps, the senior NCO Corps is definitely part of that. I don't want you to think that when someone's an NCO and there's like a second lieutenant, do they automatically outrank an NCO? Yes, but who has more experience level? And there's this senior ranking of, we'll go over some rank structure here just to fly through this, what a veteran here is. But I'm going to skip forward and then come back to it real quick here. Some military ranks. Didn't pop up here. I think I took them out. So just a quick snippet. A senior NCO would be like a command sergeant major. A command sergeant major will be outranked by a second lieutenant, but in no way will that second lieutenant ever really get to tell a command sergeant major what to do. A battalion or brigade or division will have a colonel, full bird colonel, or a division will be a general, and you would have a senior a non-commissioned officer, which would be a command sergeant major. That person would not take orders really from a second lieutenant. That's not really how the rank structure is. I want you to think of the rank structure of the military is we take our most senior person that's been in the military the longest with the most education. But a lot of times, just to be super transparent with you guys, there's tons of NCOs with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and even doctorates. It's just a different way of life on each side. A lot of times people will decide to go to the NCO Corps and want to stay there and have a great career on that side, rather as opposed to the officer side of the house. Any questions on NCOs versus officers on the two big rank structure and the reason why this has come important? Does anyone know, just slide a hand, the difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians and their rank structures? There's something that the Ukrainians changed about their military that the Russians didn't, and it's NCO. They do not have a sergeant over in Russia. They don't have sergeants. They don't have that rank. They have officers, and then they have their lower soldiers. Then there's no NCO Corps. And if anyone wants to know why the Ukrainians have been so successful on the battlefield, we believe a lot to the NCO Corps. They are allowed to make decisions on the battlefield quicker, and they don't depend on their officer corps as much. So the Ukrainians know this, and they can exploit that. If they take out their officers, decision making on the battlefield can be exploited. As opposed to the Ukrainian military, that's not a case. There's two leaders on each unit. Does that make sense? So it's very interesting if you guys look up what's going on with the Russian forces right now on the ground with Ukraine. That's one big one. Okay, so what is a veteran? I need to move my slide video deck so I can read it myself. So to be a veteran, you have to have service, right? But also you qualify for the VA services. Also, if you have an injury, there's a couple things we call like a service member that has an LOD, that's a line of duty, gets injured at basic training, they automatically qualify for all their paperwork, medical concerns to go get care at the VA. MST victims, that's military sexual trauma victims, can get should get care at the VA and at the vet centers at no cost. And the proof of your service is something called the DD-214. It is super important. It is very hard or impossible to get services without a DD-214. That'll be something that you might want to ask for. And discharge status is really important. If someone has a bad discharge, like other than honorable, that's not a bad discharge. A dishonorable discharge is a bad discharge. They can get very few services, if any, and usually from nonprofits that offer those services. There is congressional programs you can go to help service members change their service discharge. I think Congress had one called like Souls of Valor program, where you can apply to, hey, this discharge has had a detriment on my life. Can I apply to change it? And they might weigh your case, but it's a case-by-case basis. Active duty service members have full access to healthcare on base, not so much the VA. They can go to the VA, but it's going to be treated like TRICARE. They might get billable. In the National Guard and Reserves, you have TRICARE. We pay for that out of pocket. It's about $43 a month. And then about $240 a month for a family, which is really good insurance. I have that. It's not bad. Although finding, I think we can all agree, I don't know if anyone here has tried to find a therapist, is very short in the community. We've had to depend a lot on the vet centers for care, and a lot of vet centers see our Guard members without any federal service overseas. So that's been great. I'm gonna give them a huge shout out to the vet centers. So I had some photos here, and for some reason they're not loading. It was basically what you thought about the military versus what, and there was a picture of Rambo versus, and versus sweeping floors. Some guys and girls join the military thinking they're gonna, it's gonna be super hua, and your MOS is not something that you really wanted to do. So when you come into the military, I have a big advice for you. If you know anyone joining, pick a job that you love. If you pick a job that you love, you will love the military because they're going to pay you to do it. I do want to give a shout out to anyone going into drone technology or anything like that. I have soldiers that get out that were trained in drones, and they make $250,000 a year flying drones overseas. So big shout out to anyone going for drone training or anything like that. Wow, none of the reality. Okay, none of my pictures are showing, but that's okay. I can narrate them. It was basically a bunch of service members sweeping floors, and that's what you're going to be exposed to your first a year in the military. Is a lot of, especially if you're lower enlisted, it's going to be a lot of hard work. Some of the stressors that you have joining the military right away, first time away from home, might be your first job, getting to live on base. You don't have a lot of responsibility. When I say you don't have a lot of freedom. So if you join the military to get away from your family, a lot of times it's just another stressor. And the first thing, if you join the military hoping you don't want to go to school, the first thing the Army will do is send you to school. There's a little bit of, there used to be more of a culture about drinking. Now drinking is definitely something it's looked down on, and it can be punishment's pretty heavy. Our ASAP program, we did see an increase, especially in the National Guard, with alcohol issues, particularly ASAP issues during COVID. We had a lot of people pop hot on UAs for THC substance, and we had an increase of alcohol issues. Also, deployments are still very, very frequent. Moving on. Childcare has been a huge issue for everybody. Childcare cost has been an issue for a lot of National Guard service members, especially when the big thing I want you to take away from the National Guard versus active duty is the National Guard is not usually near a base for support. So finding childcare and support system is very difficult for National Guard and Reserve component folks. And that can come with a lot of legal concerns, a lot of stress issues with if you've moved recently, you're away from your family members, and then your spouse has a deployment. Not something I faced myself. My last deployment was in 2021, and my wife takes care of our 2 kids by herself, and we don't live near any relatives. But everyone was great. I had a lot of support here in the community. I live over in San Luis Obispo, and everyone was really great, but a lot of soldiers struggle with that. So military life is hard. I hesitated putting that, but I do want to say frequent military deployments, being away from your family, is absolutely a stressful thing. Frequent training events, long duty hours, 12-hour days, 14-hour days, working weekends. I'm working this weekend. I worked last weekend. It's getting time with family is tough. PCS moves, not so much myself. I've been in California for a while. I've only had to move about 3 times. That's a great thing about National Guard service, is that if you're a full-time National Guard member, you don't have to move states like ever unless you want to. Financial strain, absolutely. There could be huge financial strains, but you do get annual increases in pay and increases when you go up in rank. The other day, to side note, my wife came up to me and she said, I really want to embrace all the mistakes in our marriage. I'm like, that's great. And she gave me a big hug. Nope. Anyone get that joke? Okay, I was the mistake. All right, I'm just kidding, guys. There's no reason this can't be funny. My wife's a huge supporter of my life, and I could not be in the military without her. I just want to give her a huge shout out. So getting a supportive spouse in the military or a supportive network is, I think, the core behind having a successful military career. In my own life, just a shout out. UCLA also has a program, just a shout out for UCLA, that they have a program called the Focus Program, that if you have a military family that is struggling, they will come in and provide support, and I will provide that number to the UCLA Focus Program at the end of the brief. It's to build family resiliency. It's through the VA. It's totally free, and it's only for family resiliency. It's just FYI to the military. Moving on a little bit. I think, oh, here we go. I'm hoping my pictures will load. Okay. Oh, I'm going to move on past this. We kind of already respect the chain of command. So one of the things is too, before this brief started, someone was asking me about traveling abroad. When you're in the military, you have to get permission a lot. You can't just go do things anymore. Traveling abroad, you can't just travel to Mexico whenever you want. You can't travel abroad whenever you want. You have to get permission. And also, when you go so far on active duty, when you go far away from your post, you have to get permission for that. So that's one thing that will change. When you're in the military, you have to make sure that you're used to following the rules. The rules are a big deal. So combat, is combat still an issue in the military? Absolutely. Even though we drew down in Afghanistan, we still have service members in combat in Afghanistan that face IDF events, drone attacks, and it's something that we see abroad all the time. Obviously, there's issues going on in Ukraine right now. We're not involved in that war. Obviously, we're supporting the Ukrainians the best we can from afar. But if we were to engage in that, fighting a nuclear adversary would be very dangerous for everybody in the world. So that's something we have to tread very lightly on. Military sexual trauma, that is a huge problem we've had in the past and is still a problem today. The military has changed in how we go about, we first report MSTs to local authorities. We give them the first crack at it. And then if they don't do anything or we don't like what they've done, the military double jeopardy does not apply. And then we prosecute individuals as well. And that's still a high issue in California as well, and also the National Guard and the military abroad. Multiple health risks, infectious diseases. Obviously, we all experienced COVID. COVID was a huge thing, especially in California. I got deployed to Northern California right away during COVID. I had 2 service members, friends of mine, pass away from COVID that I knew, 3 total. That actually was the first time I lost service members in the field, was related to COVID incidents, not in combat. So infectious diseases is a huge issue right now. Traumatic brain injuries. Something in that video that played earlier, and I see that it says amputation here. I'm sure you guys saw that that the number of deaths and the number of injured were about the same. Well, one thing in operations now abroad, our number of injuries are a lot significantly higher than those that death, because we have a golden hour. We have a very mobile, fast force on the battlefield. We have forward surgical teams that go out and stop people from losing their lives right away. And we put the doctors and medical assets the farthest forward on the battlefield. So we have FST, a forward surgical team. That is very rare, and that will have a service member. If someone loses their leg, we'll try to get to them within that hour, and that's really important to us, including social workers. We were on the battlefield in bunkers, in IDF. Anytime there's an IDF attack, we're right there. We do as much therapy as we can on the battlefield. We'll do TBI screenings, whatever we can do to help service members. And if there's a mass count, everyone reacts, and we all are there to support the medical effort. Moving on. Okay, so I definitely have to talk about suicides. Anytime you talk about the military, suicide has been a big issue in the last 20 years. Suicide rates skyrocketed in the war on terror. That lasted 20 years. We're still in the war on terror. I just wanted to share this trend line. I believe this is from the VA, but this is as of 2018. After 2018, according to the VA statistics, our numbers are starting to go down, which is great. I think it's 17 a day now. For the longest time, it was 22 and then 20, and now it's 17. This is some numbers I got as of 2019. This is what the VA is reporting. California, we have not been this successful. Just full transparency, you guys, we had 11 suicides. Normally, the DoD loses 10 service members for every 100,000 service members. So California, we lost 11 per 14,000. We have 14,000 service members. That is not great numbers. Those are terrible numbers. And 1 is too many in our books, but we need to get ahead of our trend and our issues. One of the things that happened in California is we are very busy state. The fire season, I'm sure you guys are tracking. We have a very busy fire season, and we have a lot of missions. So we're trying to do better to take care of our service members all the time. And some of the things that we see is getting our service members that early access to healthcare is really, really beneficial and helpful, and helping the soldiers with childcare needs and transportation costs. I think we've all faced increase in inflation, and we've all noticed that groceries are more expensive, and that definitely hits our low enlisted soldiers first. Those that are spending money to go to a drill, and they're spending most of their money on fuel costs to go to this drill. So we did a study on we were looking at predictive factors. We looked at the BRS, the Brief Resiliency Scale, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and we're trying to looking at predictive factors on mental health outcomes within our ranks. And this is what we found. This was a just over about 3 to 6 month study. And this is our active duty population for California, just for California, guys, is about 128,000. And this varies based on the DoD manpower for 2021. And the reserve component's about 56,000. And we surveyed about 200 National Guard service members, 100 civilians. The civilians was our control group. And what did we find? So we had 56 questions, a bunch of questionnaires, some control questions. And our findings were that I thought the ACEs would be a predictive factor. And what we found, the ACEs did go up from the original study in 1994 to 1999 from Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, but it didn't go up significant enough to be a predictor. So it was a predictor, but not enough to be clinically significant. But what we did find was something really odd with resiliency, the BRS resiliency findings, is that every year someone was in the military, they had better resiliency skills compared to their peers. For example, say you take that sergeant major that's been in 20 years and you have another sergeant that's been in 10 years. The sergeant major on average would score 1 point higher for every year in service. So meaning those at the longest career service have the best resiliency skills. And that makes sense. Those with maybe not as great resiliency skills or with injuries may have gotten out, or and it is a resiliency to stay in that long. You're very resilient because you have to react to a lot of frequent deployments and a lot of stressors. So great resiliency skills. And so it was great findings that had never been found before. It was really interesting to have that for our state. So just some recommendations for clinicians that work with National Guard service members. I do want to pause just real quick. I'm moving quickly because I'm trying to be mindful of time. We got about 9 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions on the study? Nothing yet?
I had a question, Dr.
Yeah.
Bird. Is that a study you're conducting, or is it done through the state?
I did it, and then I shared all my stuff with the state.
Very good. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah. I did the study for my own doctorate, and then the Army owned me, and then so they're going to take my stuff too. So that's how the Army works. No, I'm kidding. I shared it with my supervisor, and then we're just trying to use it. Anything I can do to support service members, that is totally okay. And I just gave all my data to the state because it would benefit soldiers and their lives. So, but thank you so much for the question. So moving on to someone had a question. Yeah, Vidal.
Yeah, I had a question, sir. So
Yeah.
you said the talk's over in 10 minutes?
No, I'm going to finish my brief and then give you guys full floor for Q&A.
Okay, is there any way you could post your email in the chat so that we could reach out to you?
Absolutely. No problem.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And I'll do that at the end too. But good question. So see, here's some descriptive statistics. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to come back here. Assessment here. Okay. So just to go over some of the stuff in the study, I had the age ranges in the study, just to give you guys 19 to 77. We had a pretty good demographic range, standard deviation. This is just some hard numbers on the study. I'm going to move on quick here. Sorry, I'm going to move my video boxes. Okay, here we go. Assessment. So I think a lot of you guys, or some of you guys in here, are clinicians, and I just wanted to give you guys some recommendations. Anytime you're doing a service member, getting to know what component they are, their rank, how long they were in, and did they go overseas? But asking if someone deployed, you could say asking about their service is always a good indicator of where they were. And also the years of which they served is really, really important, because if you look at if they were serving during a time that they were worried about losing their job, or they were worried about getting cut in the military, or during COVID, it can give you an idea of their stressors. For example, if you met someone that says, I deployed, but they deployed during the surge in Iraq, their deployment could have been 16 months, as opposed to my normal soldiers now are only deploying for 9. So someone that went through a surge deployment, 16 months, as opposed to someone that went through the 9, their stressors might be entirely different. And the battlefield we went through in Iraq and Afghanistan during the beginning was like the Wild West some days, you know. Towards the end, we had control of the environment, we had control of operations, things were a little more predictable, internet was good, we could talk to our families, as opposed to the beginning of the war from 2001 to 2008 was kind of the Wild West. So it's something to be cognitive of when they serve and what was going on at the time, because even though it's the same battlefield, that battlefield has very many dynamics of how it changed over the years. So I'm moving on here, click. All right. Some of these are basic stuff about reframing from using, the stigma. Just quick question here, guys. Do you guys feel there's still a stigma in the military seeking behavioral health? I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. Absolutely. People think that if they come to behavioral health, that we're a magician and your career will disappear. And that is still very true in active duty. National Guard has been great. California has been wonderful. I want to say California commanders and leadership has been absolutely amazing in terms of trying to get ahead of the stigma. The 40th Cab unit I just deployed with, we've had a number of people get flagged for behavioral health. 0 got left behind at the platform. Everyone went forward to combat. Everyone went forward. Everyone got a waiver. There was no stigma in anyone. Hopefully no one felt stigma, but no one had to stay back related to mental health. Everyone could get a waiver and deploy. Now, what does that mean? Meaning if you have a behavioral health VA claim, a lot of times you can still be in the National Guard. You cannot do that on active duty. If you're on active duty, you cannot have a VA claim. You can have a VA claim, but you can't be getting it at the same time as serving in the National Guard. In the National Guard, you can have a VA claim and serve concurrently. You can't collect both checks at the same time because there's a dual compensation law on that, but you can serve in the National Guard and have a VA claim, just to throw that out there, guys. And any questions on VA claims or anything like that, please let me know at the end. All right, culturally informed assessment. So asking questions, getting them to seek help, getting over that stigma. The DOTI for the anti-stigma policies, DOTI 6490, I'll put it down below, 6490.08. We actually have an anti-stigma policy. Do all commanders follow that? No. And that's something we need commanders to follow, is the anti-stigma policy. California's been great on that. Active duty, I fear that they're lacking. I will say that. I know this is being recorded, but that's how I feel. I'm going to say that openly. I wish we're doing a better job at following the anti-stigma policy. Culturally informed assessment. I'm going to quick moving on here. I know I'm running out of time. What I got left. Okay, about 4 minutes. So 49% of service members screened positive for this issue. This is 2011. I would not say this number has changed. This number is still very much higher. I'd say California is doing really good on this. They're worried about impact of careers. They used to have an issue. If you were flagged for behavioral health issues, you would lose your security clearance. Now that is not so much an issue now. PTSD is still high rates among our ranks. It's something we're trying to definitely get ahead of, but now there's not so much overseas deployments. That's something we are curtailing. But one thing we still see a lot of is anxiety issues. We're seeing more anxiety issues in our 18 to 25-year-olds, but that is soldiers coming in with more anxiety issues, not so much getting them from the military. That's something we're trying to curtail, and I don't know if that's something you guys are seeing as well. So these are some suggestions for healthcare providers, and we'll again send this out. Facing labels, potential embarrassment, and these are also cultural issues among Californians all over the place and service members. Other suggestions, I'm gonna just skip here to some of the war part. Let's see. Okay, so here's some good things you can get at the VA. I recommend getting people connected to the VA. Applying for a VA claim is super important. There's medical, dental, housing, disability compensation, education benefits, readjustment counseling, specifically the vet center, home loans, and burial benefits, all from the VA. So the VA is a huge conduit to care. Getting them a VA claim or getting them what we call service connected, even 0, will help them. If you have a service member that's 0% connected, their kids can go to school into UC or CSU for free tuition. So there's a lot of benefits from going to the VA. Also, the VSO can really help. Each county has a VSO, Veteran Service Officer, and there's also the Veteran of Foreign Legions, American Legion, AMVETS, and the DAV, Disabled American Veterans. They can help filing those claims. I highly recommend, if you ever have a service member that needs that, and especially the National Guard, that is a huge component to getting into services, is getting a VA claim. If they did serve overseas on a deployment, they usually get 5 years of coverage for free. They don't have to have a VA claim. You can go get services after that. It's based on incomes basis. unless there's something else going on, like they have an LOD and they can get continued care. So depending on what's going on. The vet center has been great about that. The vet center will just see your DD-214, but in some cases, even our CAT cards has worked, but they usually like to have a DD-214. California Department of Veteran Affairs, they have their own. We have our own scholarships for the California Department of Veteran Affairs. They have a mobile app, home loans, tuition fees. They have different types of, the CalVet home loan is a little bit different. California has a robust Veteran Affairs department, and they do a lot for California veterans, sometimes even better than other states. So California is really good about that. I just want to go over some of the mental health history. Mental health in World War II was definitely something we were not great on. I don't know if anyone heard the story of Patton slapping a soldier that had an acute stress reaction. It's something we definitely need to get better on. And we had a lot of alcohol use after World War II. So World War II was, I'm sorry, that was World War I. World War II is where we also got come up shell shock, combat nerve. My grandfather came back from World War II, and he actually got a book about combat nerve, and it had advice about how his spouse should wake him up and all this other stuff. But stigma was still very high. And everything was fine, was kind of a culture. And then the Korean War was, as a lot of times known as the Forgotten War. It would definitely still, I would say, an issue, but we had psychiatry at the front lines for the first time. I want to go back to that real quick. And see this 80% of psych casualties return to duty. That's pretty good. But look at that psychiatry at the front lines. That's great. That's when we started putting our thinking caps on. The Vietnam War, I would say they're one of the most pivotal service members because they helped us create the vet centers, and they really did a lot to support service members coming back. They did not get a romantic war. They didn't get a good welcome home. And honoring Vietnam vets, they have done a lot of work of why we have a good VA healthcare system. Of what we have today is a lot because of the Vietnam veteran. They have done a lot to support a lot of multiple deployments. They're the big components behind trying to get rid of stigma, to getting soldiers to work together in a community. They were the big pushers behind the vet center. I just want to give them a huge shout out there. Obviously, Vietnam War was a very long war, like today's war, but they did not get a lot of VA services. It took them years to get services. Gulf War, 100-hour war. It limited emphasis on PTSD. We did definitely see some, but a lot of these veteran errors also were in the next war, Operation Enduring Freedom. They went to Iraq and the war in Iraq and OEF. I put 2001 there. Technically, when the war ended, we're no longer there. That's when we closed down operations. Unknown Enemy. That is kind of like the war on terror right after 9/11, going into Iraq. And I didn't include the recent changes, but there's been a lot more operation changes here. Operation New Dawn and then Operation Spartan Shield that also operates in this area, and that is to protect Kuwait from also terrorist groups and stuff that operate both in Iraq, from Iran, and in Kuwait. Moving on, MST we kind of already talked about. Personal revamped. I think I had some other support links I'll include, but also put my email, and I'll put some more stuff that I deleted earlier that are just some support links for you guys. How am I doing on time? Okay, 52. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Major Burns. So I think that was a lot of very helpful information in regards to not just helping us understand the culture and language of being a service member, but what we as professionals can do to support them and help them. Right now, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Dr. Lopez, what questions did we have?
Yeah, can we, is it okay, Dr. Burns, if you stop sharing your screen and I'll
absolutely
transition us over to the questions? Perfect. So lots of comments thanking you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, lots of comments about that. There was a question about, let's see, could you touch on how the military culture has hopefully shifted in viewing mental health wellness for service members? I think you touched on this a little bit.
No.
It was a question during your talk.
So I think the military has done a good job, but it all comes down to your unit. So if you go to a unit, whether it's at a company level, there's companies at every unit, and then a battalion, brigade. the command structure, leadership, your commander, your colonel, your captain, and your senior NCO. Those two individuals have to be the forefront. So a lot of times we get requested to do an anti-suicide brief at units. And my first request is I would like command to do it with me. Because if they see that the commander and the leadership are willing to seek help or be supportive of those services, that is the best foot forward for soldiers to step forward and request those services. Because if leadership is they put a stigma on mental health, it's going to be there. And I can't get soldiers to help if a leader puts stigma on that. If a leader can get ahead of it and say, hey, these are my soldiers and I will go support you to go get help, then boom, that helps stigma all the time. Now, there is cultural aspects to that. People come in to the military with their own cultural sensitivity to mental health, whether if it's the African-American culture, Latino culture, and seeking services in that area is hard enough from that culture, maybe in some regards, but getting past that, if you have a battle buddy or your leadership's willing to support you, that's a huge, huge detriment.
Okay, thank you so much. There was another question that you just answered is, how do we reduce stigma? And you said, getting the leadership to really take initiative and lead on that. Another question, it's actually for me.
Yeah.
Are there social workers in the military?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
a military social worker. There's a team. We have 22 social workers right now in the California Army National Guard, 2 psychologists, and we used to have a psychiatrist. He left recently, but so we have no more med pushers, just all therapy from here. I'm kidding. We still have plenty of meds. But absolutely, we have tons of social workers. If someone wants to be a social worker in the military, you don't have to be active duty. We have this program called MFLACs, Military Family Life Counselors, that are on active duty bases and support National Guard as well in some cases. An MFLAC can be a civilian, and it's totally anonymous, and it's helped to reduce stigma. You can go talk to an MFLAC counselor. They're usually a civilian. There's no documentation, and they just help you with coping skills and strategies to help with stress. It's called an MFLAC, Military Family Life Counselor. And they have them abroad in Germany, Korea, all over. And they do deploy in some cases.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question, a student asked for your contact information, and I put your FPU email, but is there another email you would like folks to use?
I'm going to I'll do 2. Hold on here. I'm trying to look at the chat box.
If you tell me what it is, I can type it.
Yeah, it's dburns0024, dburns0024@gmail.
Got it.
I'm putting my civilian, and I'll also put my government one. I have 2 different government ones. I'll put my California Military Department one. It's Daniel. I never use this email enough. I just get a lot of spam, so it'd be good to get some good emails here. California Military Department ca.gov. I have my federal one, but I'm just going to leave it at state at this time. And then I'll also put my phone number. Absolutely. Any other questions, critiques? No more wife jokes. I'm kidding. My wife's great. The other day, my wife came up to me and she said, do you want to be buried or cremated? And I was like, oh, she learned about my jokes. And I said, I wanted to be cremated because I always wanted a smoking hot body. Kidding.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Good one. Well, I don't have any other questions. I know we have a survey that we want students. There were no more questions in the chat. Thank you so much.
Someone said, does a chaplain and social worker work alongside MFLACs? Absolutely. One of my best battle buddies is my friend Chaplain Sykes. He's my chaplain as well. And we work just for confidentiality reasons. There's 3 reasons why a social worker or a therapist in the Army would breach confidentiality: harm to self, harm to others, harm to mission. If we cannot complete mission, there's other soldiers' lives that can be affected by that. And if it's a state mission, the lives of a community. So we have a little bit more reason to breach for public safety. So if a soldier has issues and cannot complete the mission, we have to breach confidentiality. Now, it's a limited breach where we just have to tell command to pull the soldier from mission, but that's pretty much it on that one. But MFLACs do work alongside with the chaplains, have ultimate confidentiality. It's covered under the cloth, they say, and that's ultimate. So the BHO has a lot of confidentiality. The chaplains have ultimate.
Okay, Major Burns, let's take one more question. This will be the final question as we are close to our time. It says, how does your faith impact your roles as a military social worker?
Oh, I would say that is the heart of my resiliency, man. Getting through a combat deployment and on my wife, and I have a great support system, but man, having faith that I think the only way you can walk out of a bunker while you're being attacked or go into that type of scenario is having faith. I didn't meet a lot of soldiers that didn't have faith in a foxhole. I think that is something that you all find when your life is being threatened and if you're going through an IDF event, is you have faith on the battlefield that, you know what, if it's my time, it's my time. I have to be right with my maker. And that is where I get a lot of my resiliency from, is my faith.
Okay, thank you for that, Major Burns. And we now have your personal information.
Yes.
So everyone feel free to flood his emails
Yes,
with
please.
questions. And so thank you, Major Burns, for giving us that opportunity to ask those questions, since we don't have time in the Zoom room anymore. But before we end, I want to thank you, Major Burns, for coming here this afternoon and really sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. We really enjoyed it. It was very informational. And so we thank you for that. We're grateful for you. And at the same time, I'd like to use this opportunity. If we could just get a show of hands for those who are service members, those who have parents, loved ones who are in the military, those who are veterans. If you could just give a thumbs up or show of hands, we'd just like to use this moment to really recognize you and honor you. Okay, so everyone, let's give our service members, our veterans, and their loved ones a hand. So thank you all for all that you do. We're very grateful. And so again, you know, November is the month that we really have this heart of gratitude. And part of that is celebrating and honoring our service members and our veterans. So this month, please make sure that you make time to thank a service member, to thank a veteran, and really honor those who are giving to our country so bravely, okay? As we are ending, Dr. Lopez has already posted our evaluation. If you have been enjoying our Lunch and Learn series, if you could please support us and help by completing our evaluations. It will also be coming out in your emails as well. So don't delete those Eventbrite emails. Those are actually going to be our evaluations that follow this session. So please make sure that you do that. As social workers, we know how important evaluations are. So we thank you for supporting us and helping us to improve our Learn at Lunch series. Not only that, but I want to promote our next session. It's not going to be until February, but it's going to be a very important topic, going over race and foster care system. So look out for that promotion that will be coming out in the next month or so. Okay, so thank you, everyone. We apologize that we kept you over a few minutes, but thank you very much for that. And Major Burns, if you could just hang back. Okay, bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate that. That was very informational. And I loved all the data and the statistics.
Yeah, some of my photos, I had graphs in there. I'm like, didn't load.